Ready or Not often reminds me of the in-your-face marketing campaigns of yesteryear. John Romero is gonna make you his bitch, promises the Daikatana ad. Did you know they had to give barf bags to viewers watching Saw? Paranormal Activity is so scary people stormed out the theatre. Being told that others are mad makes you feel like you have to understand this poor tortured soul. Ready or Not, through its realistic depictions of SWAT situations and the inclusion of a college shooting mission, taps into that same edge that gets you clicking the headline, and I felt like I couldn't really miss my chance to throw my hat in the critical ring, so to speak. Games are art, but they're also marketing. Ready or Not doesn't feel like it's jeering at you to play it through the veneer of an edgy advertisement, but it's hard to ignore that this may have worked, regardless of developer intent. On one hand, Ready or Not is an intriguing game with a genuinely palpable atmosphere, some interesting mechanics, and feels put together with genuine love. On the other, it's messy with poor AI, some ill thought out concepts, and its environmental storytelling and mechanics feel like they tap into a grander story that the game isn't quite brave enough to ever let breathe. Obviously, no game needs to talk about areas it doesn't want to, but I can't help but feel that Ready or Not desperately does. There's a reason why each of the game's main missions starts with a briefing, and sometimes that includes political and socio-economic analysis, to an extent. Ready or Not is a SWAT game, and part of the context of that is what puts people in a situation where they shoot at, steal from, and maim others. This clash between the two pops its head in immediately as the police station you take missions from has posted plastered on the wall, telling you no one is above the law, only for you to lose a mere couple of points for blowing the brains out of an enemy that's a little too jittery. Sometimes, in the likes of a Call of Duty campaign, killing waves of baddies can feel a little jarring. At its most arcadey, taking on Nazi zombies, the cognitive dissonance really kicks in, yet as it gets weightier and more realistic, firing at your third, vaguely evil enemy can be downright exhausting. Games like Ready or Not rely wholly on smashing that cognitive dissonance and even scaring you in the process. These point balances feel like a bit of a necessary evil to keep you in check without entirely halting your process, an excuse to think without a reason to ever stop. It is the gamifying of morality, and in turn can feel a little insincere. Ready or Not often feels caught up between attempting to be jarring, horrifying, and real, but also acknowledging the game should be fun. Some hostages are jittery and intentionally look like someone trying to grab a gun, essentially forcing you to stay alert. After your fourth civilian doing this, it's hard not to feel like the game is essentially manipulating you into being on your toes. All games are, of course, intensely and often intrinsically manipulative, trying to get you to care about certain characters through inaccurate or misleading framing. They pull the wool over your eyes to amaze you when you can see the full picture. Ready or Not just manages to do it in more transparent and guessable ways. In the second mission, you raid a complex housing one man who's killed his mum and kidnapped his brother. You mow down and apprehend tens of enemies, often losing your own SWAT team in the process, only to find him craned over a computer with pink kitty headphones, streaming a Call of Duty parody to his audience. That audience then goes on to immediately belittle him for getting shot in the head by one of my team. I swear it wasn't me. The house objects point to an immature man-child who has let fame and a gun get to his head and seems to point to internet violence as a catalyst for it. That same chat whispers rumours of a man getting swatted, and you're left with that split-second fear that maybe you're in the wrong for once. Turns out he's also a child predator, sexual harasser, and Discord mod, which I think is intended to be played off as a joke, but feels more inconsequential and inconsistent. That moral greyness is squashed pretty quickly. The game points to something more, but it doesn't quite engage with the questions it asks, and doesn't always feel like it cares for an answer. Then, you're out and off to the next messy mission. Ready or Not nonchalantly throws this exposition at you, but doesn't quite have the time to make it more interesting than just a matter of fact. Without it, the world would be more pale and bland, but these serious tones and genuinely quite intriguing ideas never feel like more than just set dressing, which can make them feel immature as a result. Luckily, atmospherically, the game is played incredibly straight. On first play, I wanted to say Ready or Not doesn't play it totally straight, but it just does. It just so happens that life is weird, and killing someone next to a pristine pack of crisps is funny in a brutal, dark, weird way. Taken from games like the well-loved SWAT 4, swapping to a pistol or taken from a high point gives you a clear tactical advantage, and you are punished when you don't think about it enough. Your 4-man squad can be aimed and controlled to do tasks like clearing rooms, apprehending hostages, and holding choke points. When commanding, you can scroll through colours that operate different parts of the team, with blue controlling 2, red controlling the other 2, and gold controlling all 4. This means you can hold 2 points simultaneously while flanking. Unfortunately, you can't time any actions, so simultaneous breaches are much harder to plan. Communication is both an important part of the game and one that is rarely developed past what you sense in the first level. As well as this, while the AI has some really cool functions, it also regularly breaks, with commands not going through, squad mates getting stuck indoors, and things not quite working out as well as it should for 4 highly trained SWAT officers. It doesn't help that, as booby traps start to make their way into the game, my teammates would regularly rush in and get themselves killed instantly. Despite the game constantly telling you that you have to rely on your teammates, it never gives you a reason to. You are still, after all, a one-man army. After practicing in the game, you get access to the main mode, where you lose dead squad members and have to manage the mental health of surviving ones, sending them to therapists and making them sit out of subsequent missions. In return, they unlock perks to make them more efficient. This is an interesting idea that feels managed and conceptualized poorly. For instance, when AI fails, you stop caring about losing soldiers, especially as you can simply recruit more in their place, and the perks don't really give you a reason to care about them. When they become mentally unwell, they still take up a spot in your roster and may fill it for multiple missions without going into the field. This means you are actually actively incentivized to let them die so you can fill their spot with the next meatbag that walks in the door. This could be a biting commentary on something grander like the military/prison industrial complex or systems of power, but I can't help but feel like it's more a system that has never been tweaked the right amount to really work. The fact that always strikes me as quite strange is, Ready or Not doesn't necessarily need to be those things, but it dips its toe into the water and ironically feels shallow as a result. Though Ready or Not could choose not to talk about the politics of its world or the systems that cause a rapidly declining SWAT headquarters and more stochastic attacks, it does feel impossible to make a game that involves the potential of police brutality without delving into the waters of propaganda in some way, be it enforcing or disrupting. Ready or Not within its text doesn't attempt a propagandistic defense of the systems that be, so much as represent it. After all, SWAT and police forces are constant in everyday life, whether or not they are worth merit. However, the gamifying of it, with every moment filled with antagonistic civilians and despair, plays into their current function. They are deemed necessary by virtue of their existence. The text doesn't appear to wish for a better future, just the idea of one at all. This can leave it a little socially and politically uncreative. It is what it is, so let's move on with it. It is important to note that I don't think purely the idea of showing a SWAT team or police in media means they're being endorsed or above criticism. This feels like a juvenile way to approach art, as talking about the rough edges of life is how we get to something better in the future. I think Ready or Not shies away from pure endorsement, but fails to fully understand even the police's own role in homelessness, drug abuse, and the many problems that cause the scenes you eventually run into over and over again until you get that coveted S rank. There is room to talk so much more about this, from the subtle ways that other games enforce the police, what art owes us, and what we owe it in return, but I advise you go into it and make your own reading. This does seem to be part of why Ready or Not is selectively quiet in areas. It gives you 1 + 1, but never tells you specifically how to get to 4. For the sake of the story and the world it is trying to put across, I found myself wanting it to at least attempt this, even if I thought it got it wrong, but ultimately Ready or Not doesn't owe that to me, just like we don't necessarily owe it analysis. It exists, and so do we. Driving home that need for fun, missions are mostly quite varied, and gunplay is often great. It's weighty and punchy, with the screen reacting to shots going over your head, and doors getting kicked down. Everything thumps and shakes in reaction to what you do. Enemy AI can be a little bit of a pain, especially in instances where they have literally shot me through walls, but mostly react interestingly to orders you bark at them and can be quite engaging to get caught in a firefight with. The game looks and sounds pretty good too, which complements this all really well. I feel Ready or Not will be praised for its realism long term, not because it's actually realistic, but because it feels it. Some moments can feel a bit fantastical, you can John Wick your way through a gas station, but it can make you feel genuinely shaken when rushed off guard, which is in itself a pretty great feat. This, combined with combing through levels to complete objectives and waiting for one last enemy to pop their head out, can make Ready or Not feel genuinely exhausting in quite an impressive way. The mission design as you go on often hinges on the worst parts of friendly AI, with multiple entryways, open sections and booby traps. Sometimes you're given order to walk into a room, only for them to get stuck in the door and sniped from across it. This can be quite frustrating, especially when it means all other members taking a hit to their mental health. You might as well just scrap it all and start again. Ultimately, Ready or Not is a game I'm glad I've played. Many of its systems are interesting, and even the ones I don't like or feel deeply critical of add to a game that can be genuinely quite horrifying. It is jarring, messy, complicated. It feels like it's missing part of the elements to tie all that together, missing that part of our human brain that forces many experiences together and says, that's life. It's human, as bad as that can be sometimes. Thank you so much for watching my video on Ready or Not. It originally started its life as a short review, more stripped back, and then I realised I had things to say and I didn't feel right cutting them out for the sake of brevity, so you got a slightly longer bit today. If you like what you've seen here, please do subscribe. I managed to hit 250 subscribers, which is what I was hoping to hit, and I don't really know what's next. I'm just going to keep making what I like, and we'll see who watches. I have tons of more videos in the works, essays, reviews, some other stuff. I'm really excited to get it out there. It is the first day of January 2024 right now, as I'm recording. I don't know how long this will take to get out, which might embarrass me, but I hope you've had a nice new year and ready to tackle 2024.